Coming up next on Tech News Weekly, it's me, Jason Howell, also my co-host, Mikah Sargent. We've got 3 interviews for you today and Micah's story of the week. Starting first with Kerry Davis from Axios. She joins to talk about Spotify's earnings, and it sounds like they're making some big changes to their podcast effort. Very interesting stuff for the market at large for podcasting. Also, Jason Snell joins from 6 Colors. Why? Well, Jason was at Apple's WWDC event, actually got to wear the Apple Vision Pro, and he talks about his experience putting that on his face. Also, Victoria Song from The Verge lives in New York City, and she has the Dyson Zone air mask. So she put that on her face to see if it actually made any difference amidst all of that smoke. She tells us all about it. And then finally, Mikah talks about Adobe's generative AI tools and the legal representation guarantee that they're giving. Pretty important stuff. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 289, recorded Thursday, June 8th, 2023. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Decisions. Don't let complexity block your company's growth. Decisions' rules-driven process automation software allows you to manage a complex digital landscape, build custom workflows, business rules software, modernize legacy systems, and improve customer experiences in Decisions' unified no-code platform. Visit decisions.com/twit to learn how automating anything can change everything.
And by ACI Learning. IT skills are outdated in about 18 months. Stay ahead of the curve and strengthen your IT expertise with affordable certification-based learning that will launch or advance your career. Individuals use code TWIT30 for 30% off a standard or premium individual IT Pro membership at go.acilearning.com/twit.
And by Collide. Collide is a device trust solution that ensures that if a device isn't secure, it can't access your apps. It's zero trust for Okta. Visit collide.com/TNW and book a demo today.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I'm the other guy, Jason Howell, from this strangely lit room at home. It's just not 100% podcast ready, but it's close enough.
Yes, close enough. It does what we need it to do. And more importantly, we've still got this beautiful piping audio coming through for all of you listeners out there.
No matter what, we've got the Heil PR40, the esteemed microphone, delivering you crisp, clear audio. So let's get into it. We actually have 3 interviews today, so we want to get started and get to all of them. And then, of course, later, Micah's story of the week. But let's start with Spotify. And this story is a little close to my heart, possibly our hearts at Twit, because Spotify over the last handful of years has transformed from a music-only streaming service to a podcasting bull in China shop juggernaut. That's my opinion anyways. Buying up a number of podcast entities, pulling podcasts further away from its open access for all beginnings. So you can kind of tell, like, I'm not entirely jazzed about what Spotify has done with podcasting, but I do find it interesting to see how this week during its earnings, Spotify revealed some major changes to its podcast business. And joining me to walk through what these mean for Spotify and perhaps also for podcasting in general is Kerry Flynn from Axios. Welcome back, Kerry. It's been ages.
It has been ages. I'm happy to be here, though I'm sorry to admit that I listen to a lot of podcasts on Spotify, so I guess I'm part of the problem.
No, you're not part of the problem. I mean, Spotify is everywhere, and I think that's the struggle, right? I mean, media in general is undergoing this major overhaul in the last however many years because technology companies have gotten involved in these things that before were kind of offered differently. You know, video now through Netflix, and now the Netflix empire is kind of seeing its cracks, and what does that mean for the movie industry? It's kind of similar to what we're going through with podcasting right now, and I don't blame you for that at all. It's Spotify being everywhere, and that's just the way it is. But let's talk a little bit about Spotify's earning report just to kind of get started. How is the company doing? What did they announce regarding their podcast business as well?
I really liked your analogy about Netflix, and I 100% agree. Essentially, these tech businesses came in and were like, what if we just don't make money and just start doing these crazy things that change the industry? And so now to flash forward to where they are today, the issue is, they haven't been making money. And Wall Street is like, Spotify, what if you start making money? Please do that. So a big investment they made, as you shared, was back in really 2019 was when they kicked their podcast investments into gear. And part of that was to expand the platform, right? They hoped that they could get more users, increase time on platform by introducing podcasts. But as their earnings continue to show again and again, is they poured billions of dollars into that investment and they're not getting enough return. Like, yes, their advertising business is growing, but not enough to recoup the cost that they put into that investment. And as of late, as you probably know, the advertising industry has been hit. There's just less money going into ads. There is, yes, a huge growth when it comes to advertising in audio, but it's not growing, again, as much as they need it to. So they've had to just do some cutbacks. Again, what Daniel Ek has acknowledged is that he sees that he, quote unquote, overinvested in podcasting, and he's just trying to be more responsible with money now. And they've decided to make a lot of cuts.
So they're making a lot of cuts. The podcast division is getting cut by 200 people. That's 2% of the company's workforce, which when you put it that way, 2% of the company's workforce, it doesn't sound like a lot. I think, but I'm sure it is. I mean, and especially it is for anyone who's getting laid off as a result of this. But my curiosity is 200 people from the podcast division. Do we have any insight or any understanding as far as what that is a cut from? Like how many people were positioned to be working with podcasting within Spotify? And then we know like how big of a change this actually is for Spotify's efforts in podcasting.
It's a huge hit to their podcast division. Like you said, 2%, that's of the overall company's workforce. It's not of the podcast division. That is just 200 people at the division. I don't know how many people work there exactly, but I do know from speaking to people and just seeing people grieve openly about it online is that it's bad. The big change that they did is merge Gimlet and Parcast, two of their studios that they acquired separately back in 2019. Those names are no more. And so the people that work there, a lot of them no longer have jobs because they've consolidated their efforts there. I hate to use the word streamlined, but that is the industry jargon word that they're really saying. And so, yes, people are losing their jobs with that. And it's awful. And it's what's so sad about it is those investments, when those happened, the acquisitions in 2019, it was really celebrated, right? Like the fact that these companies, they were the stars of podcasting. Gimlet is perhaps best known for Startup, the podcast. They also did Reply All. Parcast is one of the best true crime studios. True crime, one of the most popular formats of podcasting. And so, they saw it as a welcome that they would get acquired and hopefully further invested by Spotify. But the truth is, what people there have said is the writing has been on the wall there for a while. Really, again, while Spotify was really happy to invest in podcasting, the past couple of years, it's really brought less attention and effort into the podcast. And so again, writing on the wall is really what they said there is, while it is shocking and sad that it happened, it wasn't too surprising to the people there that they decided to cut back.
Yeah. Now you talked about Gimlet and Parcast being basically combined into what they're calling Spotify Studios. From the perspective of what this means for Spotify and how they produce their content. I mean, they had these separate divisions. Now they're combined. What do we see as consumers potentially from this? Do we see less new podcasts being developed by the companies within Spotify? I mean, how does this kind of trickle down to the users who are used to getting their podcasts through Spotify?
I think fewer podcasts is definitely what's to expect from that. To go back to your Netflix analogy, it's very much the same thing happening there, right? We're still seeing new shows from Netflix, right? We're still seeing new shows from Spotify. There's just fewer. But then there's the argument, well, perhaps we had too many to begin with, right? And there's not enough succeeding. Right. And so what if we invest in the ones that are succeeding? So one thing from talking to people that work at Spotify and Daniel Ek has been outspoken about, it's not that podcasts aren't working on Spotify. They tout the power of Joe Rogan. They just signed a deal with Emma Chamberlain earlier this year. Her podcast is doing incredible. Joe Rogan is doing incredible. So again, it's not like they don't care about podcasting. It just seems to be that they're putting more attention into those winners rather than spreading themselves into and creating new content that isn't making enough money for them, to be frank.
It's so interesting because the correlation really is pretty similar when we look at Spotify's impact on podcasting and scooping up, like you said, Joe Rogan and these other big names that in and of themselves might be successful podcasts, but are they translating into a successful business for Spotify and their plan? And when you overlap that with the movie industry, I just read a really fascinating article in Variety this morning that's talking just about kind of like that we are at post peak TV. Like we've been in this realm of peak television for a number of years now, largely driven by the fact that we have these big technology companies scooping up and changing the foundational structure of how Hollywood works or how podcasting works. And they did that in the guise of, well, this is how we run technology companies successfully. Why can't we do this with media? And in the end, going back to my bull in a china shop earlier, like it seemed like an interesting strategy when it was working. And now that it's not, it's like, well, what are we going to be left with? How does this kind of intertwine with the general slowdown in podcasting, in the ad revenue that is declining all around? And this is largely seems to be happening as a post-pandemic reaction. Is this really showing that Spotify isn't immune to the forces that impact the greater podcast industry in general?
For sure. Spotify is not immune to those forces. Ad revenue is down at Spotify. I guess to Spotify's credit, though, introducing podcasting was a reason why their ad revenue increased, right? And they were able to build and expand on an ad business that, again, translates into their, music platform for the people who pay for the freemium, not the ad-free version. So it did help grow that business. But to your point, they are not immune by the troubles of the ad industry. And they're not immune by being a publicly traded company and being scrutinized by Wall Street, right? Wall Street wants returns, and this company is not delivering enough right now. Same thing. We've made this analogy a bunch now, but Netflix. So these companies are being forced to make drastic changes to their strategy and enacting on it pretty fast, right? So whether it was getting rid of Parcast and Gimlet and streamlining their operations, another big change was deciding to perhaps license out their shows, right? So they did this big strategy of, we are going to have exclusive content. You can only listen to Emma Chamberlain's new podcast on Spotify. And now they're considering, what if we sell them to other platforms and make money off of licensing deals? The same thing is happening right now with Disney and TV networks deciding to make money through licensing. It's just a way to diversify revenue when their direct revenue, when the ad market is being hit. It's really, you just have to go back to how the business used to work and make yourself a little more sustainable that way. It's what's fascinating to me about that strategy as well is it was something what the Obamas, their Higher Ground studio, actually pushed for. They signed that exclusive deal with Spotify. And one area of frustration was the fact that their reach on that podcast, their podcast, was limited, right? Because not everyone subscribes to Spotify. And so then they decided to sign a deal with Audible, who they embraced that. Amazon's Audible was like, yeah, whatever, we'll have it early, but you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. And so again, we're starting to see that a lot more from these companies who are just, I hate to say it, but desperate to make money because of the pressure.
Yeah, interesting. I'll be super curious to see if in this kind of panic state of like, oh, what do we do now? If things kind of return a little bit more back to normal, maybe that's hopeful thinking. Maybe this is just a new normal and we end up somewhere completely different. But obviously, it's near and dear to my heart and everyone at Twit. We are a podcast network after all, so we follow this stuff closely. Kerry, it's a pleasure getting the chance to talk with you again. Thank you for carving out a few minutes to talk with us today. Of course, you write for Axios. I love the work that you do and that Axios does in general. If people want to find you online and follow your work, where can they find you? I don't know, tweeting or tooting or whatever the word is for whatever service you happen to be on.
Thanks for having me. It was great to return and talk about something that, we're both clearly passionate about. I guess the best place to find me is on Twitter, though I have mixed feelings about that platform now. But it's my handle is Kerry M. Flynn. You can also just go to Axios.com. That's what I am so happy to work there. My whole team does awesome coverage across the industry. Yeah. So take some time and dive into Axios.
Indeed, people definitely should. Thank you, Kerry. Such a pleasure. We'll talk to you soon and take care of yourself.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right. Have a good afternoon. All right. Up next, what is it like to see through the Apple Vision Pro, like actually on your face, looking through it with your own eyes? Well, you don't get to know for a while. Neither do I. Neither does Mikah. But Jason Snell from Six Colors, he can actually tell us because he wore the goggles, and I'm super curious to hear what he has to say about that. But that's coming up next. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Decisions. In today's digital landscape, businesses are faced with an overwhelming number of tools and systems that are necessary to operate effectively. But managing all of those tools, ensuring they work together seamlessly, it's not easy to make all that work seamlessly. Well, this is where Decisions comes in. Decisions can make it seamless for you. Decisions serves as the ultimate orchestrator for IT and industry experts, providing a unified platform for businesses to manage their digital infrastructure. So automating routine tasks, customizing workflows, that type of stuff. Decisions can help businesses reduce operational costs, improve customer service, and streamline their overall process. In a constantly evolving digital landscape, which is where we are smack dab in the middle right now, where innovation happens on the fringe, adaptability is crucial to staying ahead of the game. So using a powerful no-code platform is incredibly helpful. Decisions actually allows both developers and business users to build applications and automations without a single line of code. And with Decisions, your team can collaborate to build and adjust workflows, dynamic forms, decision-making processes that fit your unique and ever-changing business needs. Now, Decisions features a robust rules and workflow engine. That's what it's built around, as well as pre-built integrations that tap into that. They connect to any legacy systems via API. And all this is controllable within a simple drag and drop visual interface designer. Automating the small decisions frees up valuable time for your team to focus on the bigger decisions that matter to your business. With Decisions, you can customize workflows to automate routine tasks and reduce operational costs, all while better serving your customers. Managing a fragmented digital landscape, that's essential for businesses to remain competitive and successful today. Decisions offers a powerful no-code solution that unifies business practices and makes managing your digital landscape easier than ever before. So you can discover the power of Decisions today. You can claim your free demo by going to decisions.com/twit. In today's ever-changing digital landscape, managing the numerous tools and systems businesses need to operate can be a hurdle to growth and efficiency. Well, Decisions no-code automation software simplifies the complexity of managing multiple systems, allowing businesses to unify their operations, reduce operational costs, and drive company growth. And you just got to check it out for yourself to really understand at a deeper level how Decisions can help you. To learn more about Decisions no-code automation platform and claim your free demo, visit decisions.com/twit. Just go there. That's decisions.com/twit. And we thank them for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, let's talk a little bit about Apple and their Vision Pro.
Yes, Apple's WWDC Worldwide Developers Conference is underway this week. And on Monday at the keynote, Apple announced the new Apple Vision Pro headset. It is a mixed reality headset that, by all accounts, is sort of a masterpiece of hardware at the very least. And some folks were able to try it out. One of those folks is MacBreak Weekly's own Jason Snell of sixcolors.com, who was able to give the device a spin and will be joining us today to talk about the experience he had with the headset. Hello, Jason.
Hi, Micah. It's good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you here and good to talk about this. One of the unique things that I think you and any member of the press who's gotten a chance to try this headset gets to talk about is the setup process before the setup process with this headset. It's my understanding that there may even be sort of like a multi-room process. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit, walk us through it as if we have a headset on and we're looking through your eyes as you're going through what it takes to get from walking into wherever this is taking place to actually sitting down and trying it on.
Sure. So it's a rainy morning in Cupertino. Setting the scene. There's a guy with a squeegee trying to wipe all the water off of the temporary building that they put on the soccer field at Apple Park. Too much detail. So basically what they need to do is they need to have an eye adjustment because they actually have these magnetic clipped image adjusters that go in so that you don't have to wear glasses in there because there's not really room for that. I actually have a pair of something similar for the MetaQuest 2. You get your prescription and then in the long run, Zeiss Optics will fulfill it because it's technically a medical device because it's actually like corrective lenses. So those will be, if you need lenses, that'll be an extra purchase on top of the already expensive purchase that you'll be making. I would say that then, so they do that. And then also they enrolled me with basically something that if you've ever done Face ID, you hold the phone in front of your face and you kind of do the thing move where you around. Circle your face around. That's what they do. My understanding is that you'll be able to do that if you're ordering online to buy one of these, you'll actually do that yourself in the Apple Store app, and that it will be, otherwise, if you go into an Apple store, they will have an app there that will do that for you. And that is to get the contours of your face in order to find the right light shield, which is basically the piece that goes behind the hardware itself. And it blocks out the light from the rest of the world, but also it's doing padding and cushioning to get it to be the right shape for your face so that the weight is distributed top and bottom. And Apple said very specifically they don't have very many of those for this demo, but they anticipate by the time the product comes out, they will have a lot of them. So that you'll be able to get one that fits your face in the ideal way. Now, because this is a demo, basically that happens, and then we're sat in something like kind of like an airport lounge, while behind the scenes, undoubtedly, they've got this limited number of functional devices, and they will snap in the light shield and put on the corrective lenses that are closest to your prescription, and then put it in a room. And then you go in a room and there's like a fake living room there, and you sit down and say, all right, let's get started. And then I actually put on the device. And then there's an actual setup routine, which is kind of delightful, where you do some eye tracking setup by looking at following a bunch of dots with your eyes. And then you hold your hands up and it scans your hands for hand tracking. And at that point, it just drops you into reality, essentially. It drops you into a view of the room. So you don't enter some sort of like magical fairy tale land when the thing boots up for the first time. Once it does your eye tracking and scans your hands, you are in the room that you're in. And there's nothing that makes it look any different from the actual room other than that you're looking through this device.
So yeah, let's actually two things here. First, it sounds like, and you'll have to correct me if you think I'm wrong here, this is one of the most sort of bespoke products that Apple offers. It perhaps part of that huge price tag. It sounds like when someone goes through this process, there's a certain level of customization that's taking place between the potential need for corrective lenses, but also these little head shapes. Is it that they're going to have a range of, you say 25, or is it that they're sort of trying to custom make it for every single person?
I honestly don't know. I imagine there will be some range. I don't know if it's 5 or 20 or something in between, but I think it's not going to be small, medium, large. I would say, yeah, it's probably the most bespoke in a way, but at the same time, they're probably using a very similar pathway that they do for Apple Watch bands, right? Because Apple Watch bands come in lots of different sizes. Now that they've got the loops, those come in very specific sizes. Remember, originally it was just sort of like the individual Apple Watch band with a bunch of dots in it, and it's sort of like you get the big one or the little one, and then you adjust. But with their loops that are not adjustable, suddenly they've got 8 different sizes in every color, right? And I think it's going to be a little like that, where they will have, every Apple store is going to have a stock of whatever that number is of the light shields that they do. I think it is a question, like, depending on how much you rely on that, there's a lot of questions about if this is a multi-user device. And it sounds like right now what Apple is saying is it's for a primary user, and then there's like a guest mode. Kind of a bummer if you're in a 2-person household and you both want to use it, that you have to, one of you has to be the guest. But the other part of it is like, is the other person, even if there's 2 users on this thing, is the other person going to have to buy an additional light shield and like snap it on and snap the other one off and do all of that to get the right fit? And so it sounds like it's going to be a pretty intensely personal device. Then again, this is Apple. I think part of what they're trying to do here is make it as, perfect on your face as possible.
So speaking of perfection, one of the early reactions I've seen and actually heard yesterday at the talk show event was the sort of striking realization that when you go into that mode right after you've done the setup process, that it looks like reality. And John Gruber mentioned, for him at least, that he could sort of lift up the headset, put it back down, and there was no difference between what he saw. But I noticed in your writing about this that you almost didn't go that far with it. And so I am curious to hear kind of in your initial look at things, how much like real life it felt for you versus what you've experienced in the Meta Quest 2 and perhaps other headsets that you tried. I know you had experience with PSVR as well.
I've only used the original PSVR and the Meta Quest 2, and there are better headsets available now. The Meta Quest 2's cameras are black and white and they're grainy and they're nothing like this, right? And I know that Meta's got other products now that are not like the Meta Quest 2's really low quality cameras. I would say, I think Gruber's right in the sense, he is making the point that you're not coming to it from an unlikely perspective. It doesn't feel like you're looking through a camera lens that's somewhere else. It does feel like you're at the exact same perspective and height and everything as where your eyes are. They are trying to get that to be a perfect match. What I would say is, one, as John Gruber mentioned, there may be some color balance issues. I felt like the color was a little warmer. He said it was warmer, and I actually agree with him. It felt a little warmer than reality there. And that's just, that's a hard thing to get right, but it was close. And then the other thing I would say is, like, it's not perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect, but the truth is there's like, reality is very highly detailed, right? And these are 4K screens. They're really impressive screens, but the truth is they're a little softer, right? It's a camera and it's a screen and it's a little softer. I'd say it's remarkable. And I say that you can very quickly forget that you're even looking at screens and it feels like you're looking at reality. But I don't want to overhype it. It's not indistinguishable from reality, because that would require a level of detail and realism that we just don't have high resolution screens who can do that, and cameras that can do that yet. Although when you look at this, you do have to keep thinking that this is a first generation product, and chances are in 5 years, we're going to look back at it and think, wow, it's so primitive, even though it is one of the most sophisticated pieces of consumer hardware ever made. So, they could up it, and it's already pretty remarkably close to reality enough that you can sort of like forget that it's not. And that's a pretty impressive start. I just don't want to overhype it. It's not like if you woke up with that on and couldn't feel it on your face, you'd think you were looking at reality. It's not quite that detailed, but it's real close. It's pretty good. Yeah.
And let's talk about materials. It makes sense that the part that seems to be the swappable part for different sizing, you're not packing too many of the most expensive materials into that part, so it's a little bit easier to make different versions of it. But what is this actually made of? What does it feel like to lift? Is it heavy? And maybe how does it balance it on your face in comparison to the other headsets that you've tried?
Well, it's multiple parts. Think of the primary tech part as like a big curved iPhone. It weighs about a pound. A little less than a pound. The other stuff adds to the weight to it. So there's this part in front that is the heavy part. It is aluminum and glass, but it's attached to the face shield and it's attached to the head straps. And I think there's an interesting bit of industrial design going on there where up front, it feels very much like an Apple product. Again, glass and aluminum, little, very carefully machined holes and little buttons on top that feel like language we've seen in other products. It's an iteration of those products. But the strap that goes around your head is this woven material. It's elastic, but woven. It really reminded me of like a wool sweater or something like that. It's actually kind of puffy, kind of fluffy. And I think that there is an intentional thing there where Apple is trying to balance the sleek technical aspect of the front part of the product with an organic, almost homey and comfy feeling, a soft feeling on the back part of it, which it makes it feel a little more humane, which I think is what they're going for here. They right down to their philosophy of not wanting to cut you off from the real world, and they want it to be kind of like it's like some of Apple's other materials, like watch bands and various leather things that they do, where they obviously have spent a lot of money and time thinking about the materials that they're using in something like the band. And the band was really nice. It was a very well made, soft, kind of pleasant thing. And so I think they're trying to isolate the parts that are touching your body and make those soft and organic and feel like really nice materials. And then the thing that's the technical product is hanging in front of your face, in front of those objects. And so you shouldn't feel like you have a hard metal thing pressed against your face, right? I think that's what they're trying to avoid. And mine was a little off balance. I think I didn't have it adjusted quite right, or maybe I need a different face shield. It kind of was resting a little too far on my forehead. But my experience with all these VR headsets is that it takes a little time for you to figure out what the right, how to put it on and how to wear it right so that you can wear it in the long run. And, Apple, expect the best materials, I would say, with a product like this.
Right. And let's talk about the actual experiences that you had. There were lots of them and a lot of people have talked about them. But for you, I'm curious to hear what you found to be the most compelling sort of demonstration of everything you were able to try, or if there were a couple that really just got you.
Yeah, well, 3D content, I wasn't surprised that 3D content was good. Honestly, on the Oculus Quest, which is a very low resolution screen, it's the best 3D movie experience I've ever had, really, because it's different when it's going straight into your eyes and you're not wearing like weird glasses and a screen that's at half brightness, which is what happens when you go see a 3D movie in the movie theater. So being in that, not just the Avatar clip that they showed us from Avatar 2, which is obviously very aggressively 3D, but they had there's the home video that's in 3D. There are these immersive videos that are like 180 3D objects where you can like look down and see that you're on the edge of a cliff and feel a little bit of vertigo and stuff like that, or feel like you're flying. That's all, or the sports clips, which are spectacular. And it's the same thing. It feels like you're there. Those are powerful in a way that I think you got to see it to understand it, but it doesn't feel like a gimmick to me. It feels like a different kind of medium, especially the stuff that's not in a motion picture frame, although I think 3D movies will be great in it. The other thing I would say is gestures, and I know it sounds almost boring, but like I found the gesture interface where you're using your gaze to select something, so whatever you're looking at, you just look at a thing and then do a tap of your fingers and you've clicked on it. There's no cursor to move. Where you're looking is the cursor, essentially. That I picked it up so fast because it's so intuitive to realize, like, I look, I click, you hold your click gesture and you move side to side, you're swiping. You hold that click gesture and you move up and down, you're scrolling. And that all felt really natural. And the one that I keep thinking about, and I wish I could do again, is there's a little indicator at the bottom of every window when you're in this shared space with apps running and windows open. And it looks like the indicator at the bottom of the iPhone. It's that little white rectangle. And on Vision Pro, you look at it and then you grab it essentially by putting your finger and thumb together. At which point, if you hold on to it, you can just pick it up and move it anywhere in the space. You can move it to the right, move it to the left, push it back, pull it forward, and then you just let go, and that's where it stays. And it felt completely natural. The idea that you can just reach out essentially and grab a window and just move it where you want it to go. They really nailed the interactions. I mean, you could tell that this is Apple human interaction designers working for years to try to find the right way to get this thing to feel natural, and also use kind of our tapping and swiping skills that we picked up over the last 15 years with the iPhone. I think they did a really great job. There are lots of questions, I think, to be had about, like, who wants this? Will people buy it? Will they buy it eventually? What are the use cases? I think that's all fair, but as a pure bit of computer technology, it's just very impressive. It is remarkable how good it felt. And this is I know it's a canned kind of demo. It's only the stuff that they've got working, and they're 6 months away from release, but it felt like an incredibly thoughtful product that was, using all the parts of Apple that we kind of recognize as making interesting products. It's all in here, whether people want it or not, open to question. But like, I came away super impressed with not just the hardware, but like the whole user interface and the software is very good.
Nice. Well, Jason, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to join us today to talk about this. It is always a pleasure to kind of get to hear people talk about their experiences with it, because I really do think that adds to it. Everyone should head over to sixcolors.com to check out your whole review, or at least first look at this and kind of get into the nitty-gritty details. Is there a place where folks should go to follow you online, or perhaps anything else you'd like to promote?
I would say the Upgrade podcast. Oh, there we go. We got it. The Upgrade podcast at Relay FM, relay.fm/upgrade. We've got a post keynote episode up now, and then next week we'll be recording, and my co-host Mike Hurley and I both used the Vision Pro this week, so we will have some really deep hands-on thoughts hopefully about that next Monday.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. All right, up next, we take another look at the Dyson Zone wearable air purifier. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by ACI Learning, and we love ACI Learning here at TWiT. Now, IT Pro has provided our listeners with engaging and entertaining IT training for the last decade. Now, as part of ACI Learning, IT Pro and ACI Learning are elevating their highly entertaining, bingeable, short format content with over 7,000 hours to choose from and new episodes added daily. ACI Learning provides world-class service, from assisting you in choosing which learning path suits you best, all the way through to helping you find the right career opportunity. You can fortify your expertise with access to self-paced IT training videos, interactive practice labs, and certification practice tests. Life gets busy quickly. Learn the way that works for you at home, at work, or on the go. You can check out ACI Learning's practice labs, where you can test and experiment before deploying new apps or updates, all without compromising your live system. You can try out your skills on virtual machine labs with multiple instances of Windows Server and desktop clients on your Mac OS, Linux, iOS device, and on the Windows platform. You can take and retake practice IT certification tests so you're confident when you sit for the actual exam. ACI Learning brings you IT practice exam questions from Microsoft, CompTIA, EC Council, PMI, and many more. You can focus on your future with ACI Learning, because it's with you every step of the way to help you choose the best certifications for your needs. The most popular courses from ACI Learning include Microsoft Azure Administrator, CompTIA CISA Plus, Security Plus, and A Plus, accredited ITIL4 Foundation, Cisco CCNA, CISSP, that's Certified Information Systems Security Professional, and so much more. Learn more about ACI Learning's premium training training options across audit, IT, and cybersecurity readiness at go.acilearning.com/twit. For individuals, use code TWIT30 for 30% off a standard or premium individual IT Pro membership. That's go.acilearning.com/twit. And of course, we thank ACI Learning for bringing this episode of Tech News Weekly to all of you. Thank you for your support, ACI Learning. All right, we are back from the break, and that means it's time for Jason Howell's next interview.
All right. So I will admit that I've been having some flashbacks this week, reading the news of the horrible air quality that's hitting New York, the New York area, New York City, with the wildfires that are raging in Canada. Here in California, I mean, we've talked about it on this network a number of times because in the last handful of years, we've had a number of these kinds of experiences. Needless to say, it's horrible. I feel for anyone suffering through this air quality event right now. If you thought that technology could save you in the event of this kind of air quality event, I hate to tell you, it might not be your saving grace. You might have to look elsewhere. But Victoria Song from The Verge last month actually reviewed the Dyson the Dyson Zone air mask. This week had a real reason to use it. To kind of follow up on the review. So Victoria joins me now from New York. Welcome, Victoria. It's good to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You bet. And I will admit, there was a photo that you put on The Verge that caught my eye immediately of you outside in New York with the air quality as horrible as it was, wearing this air mask, the Dyson Zone. So it caught my attention. I was like, we got to talk to Victoria about this. There it is. There it is.
That was me. So yeah, that's.
Before we get into kind of the immediacy of the application of this device, first, I guess first things first, how are you doing considering that the air quality is so bad, aside from all the technology implications? Are you pretty protected from it in your home? How are things going?
It's really funny because I tend to go heads down in my work a lot. So I'll look up and be like, oh, time to eat. And then I literally did that yesterday and I looked outside and I was like, why is it orange? Oh my God, it's orange outside. What? And then I, started looking in Slack and going on my phone. I was like, oh, I should break out this Dyson thing and go out. And so, I went out and I did some mini testing that I didn't get to do when the weather was very nice, a month and a half ago when I was originally reviewing this thing. But, I went outside and I was like, oh my God, this is awful. This genuinely sucks. There's fire trucks and ambulance sirens going off left and right. I feel like the world is ending. It smells bad. I actually was only out there for about 20 minutes because, my editors gave me a stern talking to where they were like, don't die for content. And I was like, oh, they care. But at the same time, I was like, it's who, if not me, then who? But I was out there for 20 minutes and I had a headache for 2.5 hours afterwards. So I was like, my God, this is horrible. I'm never going outside again, which is on the one hand easy because I'm an introvert. On the other hand, hard because I do a lot of running. So I was actually kind of miffed at the air. Yeah. I was like, I'm a runner and I don't do treadmills unless I'm reviewing one. So thanks.
Yeah, it's a very post-apocalyptic feeling going outside when it's covered in that kind of heavy smoke and you feel it in your lungs. I feel for you. I'm so aware of how much that sucks, that environmental impact sucks. So before we get into kind of how this mask, how you've tested this mask with the current situation happening, let's talk a little bit about your original review. Of course, you reviewed this back in April. What exactly is it? Was it created with this kind of event in mind? I mean, obviously it comes post-COVID, so maybe that's more what it had in mind. But kind of what are your thoughts there?
So, I think those are all logical, like, assumptions to make based looking on it and then thinking about what Dyson does and the current situations that we're in. But actually, it's none of those things. This is primarily, first and foremost, a pair of noise canceling headphones. And then Dyson was just like, hey, like, we have a lot of air purification technology, which, they do. Their air purifier, very nice looking piece of technology. What would happen if we miniaturized it? And what if it could be wearable? So they spent a lot of time actually developing it. And it just turned out to be a device where it was like headphones. But what if we had a detachable visor, magnetic detachable visor that you stuck on your face and it would blow clean air into your face? And so, we're in like kind of the aftermath of the pandemic. COVID's still around, but still a pandemic, like that weird liminal space. So this comes out and, you're like, oh, well, it's a mask, right? So it should filter for viruses, right? Absolutely not. It does not, because the visor doesn't actually create a seal with your face at all. There's like a space between the visor and your mouth, and it's also blowing air. So as far as like protection from viruses and microscopic particles getting into your nose and making you sick, it's actually not going to do that job. A N95 mask will do that better.
That is okay. You called it absurd, an absurd wearable in your title, and that's the word that keeps kind of reverberating in my mind. I'm so confused. Who asked for these two things to be combined into one? Like, it's not like chocolate and peanut butter. It's not an obvious combo, or maybe that wasn't an obvious combo at one time, but these two things together don't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. And it's not an inexpensive device either. It's like almost $1,000, right?
Yeah, it's $949. So let's round it up to an even $950. But yeah, it is an interesting question, right? Like, who asked for their headphones to purify their air? Literally no one. But people are asking for two separate things at the same time. They are asking for really good noise canceling. And they are, in some parts of the world, California, you guys have experience with this. And now I have my first experience with this wildfire smoke. Yeah, so it's like clean air, I think, is becoming more of a concern to people. But, in Asia, I have relatives, and in Korea, they're always just like, the smog from China is blowing over. The air is terrible. So, it's been a problem for a really long time where people do not necessarily have clean air to breathe. And, you're going outside, an N95 mask, we all know what that feels like now, right? It's not necessarily the easiest to breathe in. And when you think about pollution in the air, that definitely has an effect on you long term over time. So they're not wrong in identifying that as a need that people have. They've just been like, we're Dyson. We love to over engineer things. So, it's like, they kind of ask, like, should we do this? Like that like classic question of they asked if they should, but they did. Oh no, they asked if they could, but they didn't ask if they should. Right. I think they did the reverse of that here. They were like, should we do this? Yeah. Can we do this? Let's find out. And so if you look back at the prototype images of the Dyson Zone, it's wild. You have to wear a backpack and it's very hard. So from a hardware standpoint, this is a very impressive device. There are certain things about it where it's just like, oh my God, that's so thoughtful. And then there are other things about it where you're like, have you gone outside lately? Do you know what people are like?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's where I'm super puzzled, because especially in the mindset where we are now, there's post-pandemic. So the majority, at least here in the US, the majority of Americans' experience with wearing a mask is, I wear this mask to protect myself from virus, or now I wear this mask to protect myself from heavily polluted air or smoke in the air. I don't want to breathe particulates. Yet this device, so when those people then look at a device like this, the logical assumption is this is a tech device that will replace the reasons that I've needed to use a mask in the last 2 to 3 years of my life. But the reality is it does neither of those things, because it's not sealed. It's just basically pumping clean air kind of in your general face area, right? Yeah. So it doesn't, how effective was this when you wore it outside? I have to imagine it did very little, if not nothing.
So there is a air quality tracking component to these things. They do have sensors, so you can kind of see the air quality in your area. Like there's a huge like asterisk with me talking about that. But in terms of my general experience walking outside with it, so my husband wouldn't let me out of the house unless I agreed to wear an N95 mask while testing this thing. So when I wore it with the mask, you don't feel the air blowing on you. I had it blowing at like the highest setting possible, and I didn't feel any clean, pure air coming in my face. So in that instance, you're like, okay, so there's no point, right? So then my husband will never find out, but there was a few minutes where I took the mask off, the N95 mask off. And I don't recommend anybody do that. That's not like, I did this for the blog and because who, if not me, then who? But I took it off and I was like, oh, walking around in this, I do feel the clean air in my face. I do feel that it's cooler. I do feel that it's fresher. Like when you have such polluted air around you, the contrast of clean, purified air, it's quite noticeable. However, there is no seal. So I'm still sniffing the horrible burning smell. I'm still like, my eyes are still watering. My throat is still irritated. So like in this context, you're kind of thinking about it like, okay, well, it just makes it slightly worse. Kind of.
There's your tagline for this device. It just makes things slightly worse. Or slightly better, depending on your perspective. Yeah, but so it's so complicated because,
I think my biggest issue, like I had those thoughts after I went out and I did my little test and I thought about it. But my biggest issue actually was within the app itself because I was walking out there and it will live track air quality, right? So I'm going out there and I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, haha, this is going to tell me that the air is crappy, right? No, it told me the air was great. It told me the air was good, that the quality was fine. And then, yeah. That's what the little live tracking graph shows you. And so in the moment, I'm experiencing my first wildfire smoke, my first dystopia. Like this is my first taste of being a dystopian video game character wearing this thing that makes me look like Diva Bane from Overwatch, or like Bane. Yes, those are the two I get, Diva or Bane. So I'm wearing that. I'm actually getting funny looks out in this apocalypse hellscape, and I was like, "What are you looking at? I fit in like this. This is like the most I've ever fit in." Wearing this thing anywhere. But yeah, so,
if not now, when, right? Like this is the moment for a mask like this. Yeah,
absolutely. But, like I'm feeling all the things at once. I am like a health tech journalist. I do science reporting. I report on wearables. I know like the ins and outs of this product. So I totally forgot until like maybe 15 minutes in to my little jaunt around the hellscape that like this thing only tracks nitrogen dioxide in terms of like pollutants. And now nitrogen dioxide, it's basically something that you're most likely going to see in a city from fuel combustion. So like car exhaust fumes, like that sort of thing. It's bad for your health. But, it's only measuring for concentrations of basically nitrogen dioxide. It's not measuring for all of the crap that's in wildfire smoke. And you have PM 2.5 particulates, you have PM 10 particulates, which, refers to the size of the pollutants. And the thing about wildfires, and I'm sure you know because you're from California, but this was a learning experience for me, but it's basically like, you have natural and organic pollutants from nature burning as it does in this situation. But then as these fires spread, they also start to destroy man-made structures, and those man-made chemicals also get released into the air. So it's really just kind of a mix of things. And it doesn't mean that there's no nitrogen dioxide that you're breathing in. It just means that the concentration around me at a specific point in time that I was walking around was not necessarily bad. And within the app itself, it does tell you that it's unhealthy, but the way the UX is you kind of have to swipe down to see that information, to see the PM 2.5, the PM 10 thing, and to see the air quality index, and to see, like, if I said in very big letters, very unhealthy. And I was like, well, thank you. But that's not like just the way the app is designed. A lot of people are not going to go and read the educational text within an app because who has the time? Me, I get paid to do it. so I have the time. But, most people are not necessarily going to swipe down to look for that information. Like, it's there, you could see it, but I think the impulse is to pull out the app and go like, what's the air quality? Good? I'm good. So it's telling you like it's good for nitrogen dioxide, and that's
that
it.
One thing. Boy.
Yeah.
Okay. Can see a lot of ways in which this device can be improved.
Well, it is a first generation concept. I like to think of it as a concept device that they're saying like, here's what we can do with the engineering. Is it practical? I mean, like Dyson would never say it's not practical, but I mean, come on, like realistically speaking, I've structured my review, which is basically like a little diary of what my week wearing it was like. I structured it that way because does anyone really want to know the specs of this thing? No, they want to know what it's like to actually wear this kind of futuristic weirdo device and like what it actually means for like this type of technology and how we're going to use these things going into the future. It's not a thing that the average person is going to buy, but it does raise a lot of questions about how we use these devices. Like, I sat on a New York City train while reviewing this thing wearing this device, and I've never felt more ignored and more stared at in my life simultaneously. It was an experience.
I can only imagine. Well, thanks for doing what many other people would not dare try to do. You're doing it in the name of journalism, and we appreciate it. Victoria Song writes for The Verge, and actually you have an article coming out later today that expands on your experience in New York with this device. Is that right?
Yes, it'll try to do it quickly, but I'm a windbag, so it's going up sometime today whenever my editors are done with it. So we have that.
Right on. Everybody should check it out. Victoria, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I have to imagine if asked, which would you rather put on your face, the Dyson device or the Apple Vision Pro? I think I know the answer, but real quick, what's your answer? I'm
just going to say the Vision Pro because I haven't tried it yet. That's the only reason. Like as far as like something that I would actually use in my daily life, more likely it would be the Dyson because it's actually a functional pair of, noise canceling headphones, and it does noise canceling really, really, really well. It's just the combination of it is interesting.
Yeah, you can't help but focus on the other thing, I think. Victoria, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Take care. All right, coming up, Mikah's story of the week. That's up next. But first, let's take a moment and thank the sponsor of this episode of Tech News Weekly, and that is Collide. Collide is a device trust solution that ensures unsecured devices can't access your apps. Collide actually has some really big news. If you're an Okta user, Collide can get your entire fleet to 100% compliance. Collide patches one of the major holes in zero trust architecture. That's device compliance. So when you really think about it, your identity provider only lets known devices log into apps. But just because a device is known doesn't actually mean it's secure or that it's in a secure state. In fact, plenty of your devices in your fleet probably shouldn't be trusted at all. Maybe they're running an out-of-date OS version. Maybe they've got unencrypted credentials lying around. If a device isn't compliant or isn't running the Collide agent, it simply can't access the organization's SaaS apps or other resources, full stop. The device user can't log into your company's cloud app until they've fixed the problem on their end, full stop. It's that simple. For example, a device is going to be blocked if an employee doesn't have an up-to-date browser. And that's just one example. Using end user remediation actually helps drive your fleet to 100% compliance, and it does so without overwhelming your IT team. Without Collide, IT teams have no way to solve these compliance issues or to stop insecure devices from logging in. With Collide, you can set and enforce compliance across your entire fleet. That's Mac, Windows, and yes, Linux. Collide is unique in that it makes device compliance part of the authentication process. It's all tied in there in the beginning. When a user logs in with Okta, Collide alerts them to compliance issues and prevents unsecured devices from logging in from the start. It's security you can feel good about because Collide puts transparency and respect for users at the center of their product. So in summary, Collide's method essentially means fewer support tickets. It means less frustration. And most importantly, 100% fleet compliance. How about that? Visit collide.com/TNW. You can learn more, and you can also book a demo by going there. That's KOLIDE, collide.com/TNW. We thank Collide for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, Mikah, over to you. What you got?
Yeah, so we talked, I think it was while you were out, if I remember correctly. I spoke with someone who was able to try out, and I'm trying to go back. There we go. Stephen Shankland from CNET talked to me about Photoshop's new generative AI tool. And it is kind of a whole new system that lets you create photos that you can then add stuff to. And along with that is, as a whole, Adobe Firefly, which is kind of the blanket terminology for all of the generative AI magic that Adobe is doing. Along with that came the conversation that I think always comes up regarding AI tools, but particularly with Adobe, because they are and have long been champions of creative folks. I mean, they help to enable an entire industry of creatives. So because of that, the question came up of, well, is this good for Adobe to be getting into generative AI? Because it has long been considered I shouldn't say long been, but since its introduction, it has been considered a means of potentially taking the work of artists and repurposing it, and therefore kind of stealing the work of artists. Well, Adobe, to come out with this tool then kind of flew in the face of that. And so I actually asked Stephen Shankland about this, and Adobe is being obviously very careful about how it has made its generative AI tools, and also the Firefly model itself, according to this Fast Company piece, it's trained on stock images, which Adobe already has the rights to. So basically anything in Adobe's stock library is part of it, as well as openly licensed content. So Creative Commons licenses, and then of course public domain content. So all of that is what Adobe has used to create Adobe Firefly. There's no usage of art that is online, that is not part of the public domain, or that is not licensed properly. And that then results in, the argument that this stuff was available, was out there, and can be used. Now, here's what makes this, I think, far more interesting. There's been a conversation and a lot of back and forth about different companies offering licensing, offering paid services, offering all this stuff. Because what if I am I make a magazine, right? I'm a magazine publisher, and I, as part of the layout of the magazine, use an image that was created with generative AI. And so when I do that, I publish my magazine and it goes out there, and some artist out there that just so happens to have the same sort of design language sees the magazine that I published and decides to sue me, and says that either I've directly stolen their work, or then, it comes out that I used AI to do it. And then they say, well, you stole it because you used AI, which stole it. That's been the concern. That's why we've seen some kind of interesting licensing when it comes to stock photo services. And Adobe obviously offering this needs to make sure that it's got all of its ducks in a row. So they feel they do, or it feels it does have all of its ducks in a row, because if folks are using the what is the term, this sort of corporate version, the enterprise version of Adobe Firefly, Adobe says, we will cover any legal bills related to your potential for being sued for copyright violation. We are so certain that we can prove that there's no copyright violation involved with our tool, that if something does come up, we will pay the bill because there's nothing to worry about.
That's huge.
That's huge. And what I think this does, I think that more than anything, what this shows is Adobe and Adobe's lawyers have everything that they need already figured out, right? They can show very easily, very clearly, this is how this model was trained. Here's how you should understand what that means. There's not even a reason to have a lawsuit in this case. You know, it's not, this is not Adobe preparing to use whatever funds it has available to pay for a bunch of lawsuits. It doesn't think that it's going to get to that in the first place. And this is its way of signaling that. And I think it's smart on Adobe's part because I know there are a lot of companies out there like that magazine publishing company I made up earlier that do have concerns. Well, yeah, it would be great if we could use generative art in the stuff that we're doing, but I'm worried about what that could mean for my business if somebody decides to come along and sue us. So Adobe's saying, go forth and create. You needn't worry. We've got it all figured out. And I think that that's what kind of makes this rather magnificent, that they have somehow found out how to do this. The company has said that, according to this Fast Company piece, you know, there's money set aside if that should arise. But again, it's more about the fact that they don't feel that it's going to happen. I'll quote a little bit from the piece. Says, when we control it against stock images, it's as good or better in terms of field compliance and IP checks. We feel very good. This is totally and completely commercially safe. I mean, risk is never zero, hence why we offer indemnification. So, you know, there could be somebody somewhere who accuses, but more than anything else, they're going, we know how this works. We know that it'll pass these checks. We know that if it doesn't pass these checks, we can prove that we've only trained it on this set of data. So it's good to go. So yeah, I'm curious if we'll see other companies that are creating generative AI art or stock photos or what have you. Also, not necessarily putting their money where their mouth is fully like this, but working in those kind of guarantees that at the very least we have proof that shows that where our data is trained does not run contrary to any copyright laws, and that there's not concern for infringement in any of this. I think that makes it a tool that we're going to see even more used on that level. You know, individually, a lot of people are using it. They don't need to have that concern, but to see it being used on that level, I think is now potentially opening up even more, especially given how Adobe kind of bakes everything in. And it, you know, there are lots of fields where there are dozens and dozens of different tools that people use, but particularly when it comes to graphic design, illustration, and print work, there are very few tools out there that sort of reach the level that Adobe does in its tools. And so because of that, you know that this is sort of industry change and industry signaling that people can sort of feel comfortable using these tools and not have that concern.
Yeah, I'm curious to know. So if the data set that the system is trained from is from Adobe's own stock images, so there's obviously no potential litigation coming from that because it's Adobe's products, Adobe's stock images, so no threat there, as well as openly licensed content, so Creative Commons images and public domain content. If it's truly Creative Commons and it's truly public domain, then does the I guess where my brain is I'm trying to understand where the actual threat of lawsuit comes from then, because
I think that Right. That should be enough, right? That should keep you from,
right.
But I think that it ends up not being enough because there's the human element involved.
Yeah, if people have different interpretations of what those things mean or something.
Yeah. Well, not even that, but let's think about, okay, so I'm an artist and I exclusively make art with, different colored triangles, right? So I've got all of my photos, all of my stuff is always these tiny little triangles that come in different colors. And over time, I've built a name for myself. All of my work is copyrighted. I, have it available for sale. But 150 years ago, some artist in Europe also happened to use triangles and colors in their piece. And it is public domain because it's long been expired. And so it gets scooped up into Firefly. Now, I see that. I'm not aware of that artist from 150, 200 years ago. And I bring a lawsuit. Now it comes down to Adobe, or, well, in this case, before it would be that company having to go and find that there was an artist 150 years ago and proving that I'm not the first person to have that idea. So I think that because ultimately everything just repeats itself, there is an opportunity for what may look like copyright infringement to not be copyright infringement, but it's still going to get to the place of a lawsuit, or potentially get to that place of a lawsuit. And that's where the discovery process happens. So yeah, I think for the most part, this will shut down. There will probably be, the good lawyers out there who are not just trying to drain money would tell their artist clients, look, they're pulling from these three places. They're going to prove that every time. There's no reason to do a lawsuit for this. But maybe some folks who just want to suck the money out will go, let's go to court. Yeah. Let's try to prove that this is copyright infringement. Turns out, no, it was a Moroccan artist from, 50 years ago.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. I think it's great for Adobe to put their money where their mouth is as far as this is concerned, because they're going to be, more and more as awareness grows around these tools and the potential threats and in using these types of tools for something like lawsuits and also kind of the ethical considerations, because I think there are a lot of people that use these tools that want to use them ethically, or want to know that they're produced with this sort of thinking in mind. As all that stuff becomes more and more prevalent, things like this are going to be necessary because, I'm sure Adobe wants people to actually use its products. I mean, I look at generative AI and Photoshop and Adobe's tools in general, and I'm just like, man, what a match made in heaven. Like Adobe's got to be so over the moon about what this sort of thing opens up for them. Even just looking at the example, animated GIF, if you go to the Fast Company article, there's this animated GIF of, basically copying this portion of a poodle's hair and then very easily, giving that poodle an afro essentially with the hair, right? This like poofy afro. And just to think about what that would have taken prior, that would have taken someone, obviously an artist with a lot of knowledge on how to like nip and tuck and make and fit it in and use the right tools and everything. And when I look at that, I don't look at that as, oh, you're putting that artist out of business. I look at that as the tool just got better. So that artist can do more now. That artist can expand out in ways that maybe they were time crunched before because they had to do all this little work. Now they don't have to do that little work. So where can they spend that time next? And Adobe's just in a really great position here. So they want people to use the tools. Assurances like this are going to help with that. And I think that's great. Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing it grow all over the place. This is, even Apple, who on stage did not really use the term AI or artificial intelligence. They really like machine learning as their sort of go-to set of words or phrase, I guess. Right. But so many of the things that were announced at WWDC, because that's the time when all the new software is announced, is backed by machine learning. And in fact, the autocorrect system has been completely redone from the ground up using what's called a transformer model, which is akin to, is in the same sort of family
as direct family, I guess, as these generative AI models that will, in theory, massively improve folks' experience with autocorrect. So it's all over the place. But I think where this is so important is, that there were companies their lawyers were going, you had better, talking to the CEO, you had better instruct all of the artists we have on staff never to use those generative AI tools. Because if they do, we need a feature to just disable those. We can't risk. So Adobe almost certainly heard from companies saying something along those lines, and knows that they have to make it so that people can feel comfortable using these tools and speeding up the process and continuing to be a value to the folks who pay the sometimes ridiculous prices of Adobe. Well, I shouldn't say ridiculous. It's, but the high prices. Yeah. Costly subscriptions to Adobe.
Yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it, because we're also seeing that from a lot of other companies, like in relation to ChatGPT. All these companies basically say, nope, don't use ChatGPT. There's too much liability, too much this, too much that. So
yeah, and they don't want
Adobe is a brand that is everywhere, and and it is dependent. I mean, many large businesses and corporations are dependent on Adobe's software, and Adobe's business model is dependent on them too. So they've got to make these choices. Yeah,
it's a sort of back and forth there. So it's got to balance it out. All right, that's my story of the week.
Right on. Good stuff. All right. Well, we've reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. We do the show every Thursday, twit.tv/TNW. That is the handy website. If you enter into your URL bar of your favorite web browser, those letters in succession, it will take you to our website where you can click a button and subscribe to our podcast, because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. Go there, subscribe, get our episodes without having to jump through hoops in order to make it happen. Subscribe gets it to you automatically. It sends signals to our sponsors to tell them, hey, people are listening, and that's good for business. So we appreciate when you do that. twit.tv/TNW.
The other most important thing you can do is join the club. twit.tv/clubtwit. When you join the club, starting at $7 a month or $84 a year, a whole year for $84, you get a bunch of great stuff. First, every single Twit show with no ads. It's a completely ad-free experience. You get access to the Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else, behind the scenes, before the show, after the show, outtakes, as well as Club Twit events, and access to the members-only Discord server. You've probably heard of Discord by now. It's a fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club Twit members and also those of us here at Twit. A lot of fun, a lot of people in there chatting regularly, sharing a bunch of information. It's a hangout spot. It's great. It's a great time. All at twit.tv/clubtwit. Now, I said starting at $7 a month because it's not a tiered service. It's not like, well, if you give us a little bit more, then you get this and this. No. We heard from folks that said, hey, look, you keep adding more value. We'd like to give you more than just $7 a month. So you get the choice. It starts at $7. If you want to go up from there, you absolutely can. And of course, we appreciate that. It's wonderful. It helps us keep doing these shows that we do. But, with that comes more value to Club Twit as a whole, because we have continue to add more great stuff. You get access to Club Twit exclusive shows like the Untitled Linux show, which is available in the club. There's also Paul Thurrott's Hands on Windows program, which is a short format show covering Windows tips and tricks. My Hands on Mac program, which is a short format show covering Mac and iOS and iPadOS tips and tricks. It's all of Apple's devices. And the newly relaunched Home Theater Geeks from Scott Wilkinson is there as well. So yeah, over time, we continue to add more stuff there and make it even more compelling to join the club. And honestly, you also get that warm, fuzzy feeling in your heart, knowing that you are supporting the stuff that we do here and making it so that we can continue on with these shows. That matters. It means a lot to us when you join the club and show your support there. twit.tv/clubtwit. If you want to follow me online, I'm at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUAHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. Check me out later today if you're a Club Twit member for Hands on Mac. I'm currently covering Windows management on the Mac, as well as on Sundays, where you can watch Leo Laporte and I cover the questions that you have live on air for Ask the Tech Guys. Folks call in. They have their various tech problems that they need, some sort of support with, and we do our best to help you out with that. And also check out iOS Today on Tuesdays, which I record with Rosemary Orchard. We have a lot of fun covering all of Apple's platforms. Jason Howell, what about you?
Well, at Jason Howell on Twitter, twit.social/@Jason Howell. There's All About Android every Tuesday, twit.tv/AAA if you like Android. Or if you're just curious about Android, then you can check out that show. Actually, this week I reviewed the Pixel 7a, the latest A-series phone, which is kind of like Google's mid-range, even though this is $500 and the premium, the Pixel 7, the next step up is $600. So they're only $100 difference now. They're so within the same range at this point. Little bits of differences. But anyways, I talk all about that in my review on this week's episode from Tuesday, twit.tv/AAA. Thanks to everybody at the studio who help us do the show each and every week. John Ashley, John Slanina, sometimes Burke, definitely Burke behind the scenes doing testing of the guests and everything. Everybody helps us do the show each and every week. Couldn't do it without them, and we couldn't do it without you watching and listening each and every week. So thank you for doing that, and we'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here. In case you hadn't heard, Home Theater Geeks is back. Each week, I bring you the latest audio-video news, tips and tricks to get the most out of your AV system, product reviews, and more. You can enjoy Home Theater Geeks only if you're a member of Club Twit, which costs $7 a month, or you can subscribe to Home Theater Geeks by itself for only $2.99 a month. I hope you'll join me for a weekly dose of home theater geekitude.